Welcome back to another Mind Espresso. These are 3 to 5 minute mind hacks from some of the top minds in the world that I've either interviewed or read. And today I'm going to talk about peak and flow and sushi and Matthew McConaughey. And I'm going to try to bring this all together. Now, Peak is a book by Anders Ericcson, the recently late Anders Ericcson, who talks about what it takes to reach your peak of performance. Flow is by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. It's a mouthful, but he talks about how do we end up in the zone and what does that mean for our ability to reach our potential. Now I'm going to throw in Matthew McConaughey, who was brilliant when recently asked a question. That question was, who is your hero? And he said, me, 10 years from now. So much brilliance in that response, because what he's implicitly telling himself is that he's an unfinished product, that he needs to keep growing, that he needs to be better, and ultimately for himself and for his kids, he needs to become the best version that he can be. Now I want to bring in Anders Ericcson. Recently passed away, he wrote the book Peak, and you may actually know Anders' work from another book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and Malcolm Gladwell talked about the 10,000 hour rule. It turns out he got it a little bit wrong. 10,000 hours is not the minimum that you need to be great at anything. It is actually an average that they estimated over different disciplines when looking at what makes people great. But the 10,000 hour is really just a marker for that that says it takes a lot of deliberate practice to be great at anything. And what Anders did, which is so useful, is he broke down how you actually get there. And he talks about deliberate practice over time at the edge of your abilities with feedback, with a goal, and that you are constantly getting feedback through deliberate practice and getting better. And then there are no limits. And he argues very strongly that greatness is bred and not born. In other words, it is a result of our commitment versus anything that we were born with right off the bat. Now, of course, we're going to be born with some strengths physically or mentally, but the difference between those who excel and those who don't is those who excel figure out a way to put deliberate practice into play, again, at the edge of your abilities. And why this is so important, and I bring in Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, is that in the book Flow, he found out that flow, getting in the zone, that happens when we're at this nexus of skill and challenge, right? Where the challenge stretches us, it's at the edge of our abilities of skill, and it requires our full concentration. And when we're there, ego falls away, the challenge becomes its own reward, and we get to intrinsic motivation, or flow, or in the zone. And he had a great quote here. He said, the best moments in life are not passive ones. They're when the mind is activated, the body is activated, and we're stretched to a challenge at the edge of our limits in a voluntary effort to do something difficult or worthwhile. And it's then that we experience this feeling of being in the zone, or the feeling of flow, as Mihaly talks about. And he goes on and he said, when we're there and we're doing this, this becomes intrinsic motivation, where the challenge is enough on its own, where we are motivated to accomplish the thing, the ego falls away, time flies, every action, every movement and thought follows inevitably from the previous one, like jazz, right? And that is flow. And why these things are so important together is our ability to achieve flow enhances our ability to achieve our peak, right? Our ability to practice deliberately in a concentrated way. Both argue that we have to be concentrated here. It's deliberate practice with our full attention that allows us to get into flow and to reach our peak state. When we do that, we grow our brain. Now, what I loved about flow is it also aligns with this Japanese concept of shokinen, which was made famous in the movie Jiro of Sushi. And in it, they talked about artistry, right? Or artisanry, which is the ability to focus on something where the task itself, reaching perfection, becomes its own reward. And why is that so important? Because when we're extrinsically motivated, we're doing something because we think we're going to get a cookie at the end, right? Whatever your cookie is, money, relationships, whatever. You're not going to do it as well. You're not going to hit flow state, and you're very likely not going to want to stick it through. Peak, flow, sushi, maybe with Matthew McConaughey, and that is this week's Mind Espresso.